lot of snow today. We got 10 inches of snow, highly unusual for East Tennessee. So in a way it was kind of nice, but in another way it wasn't so great because I was about to do a video on winter sowing. And I did get 12 bins winter sown before the snow began. I must admit it's really beautiful, but having come from Colorado and grown up there, pretty much had my fill of snow. And so we don't get it much here in East Tennessee, and actually I'm pretty glad about that. Underneath all this snow, I had planted, before the snow began, I sprinkled poppies and larkspur and cornflowers. Underneath all that snow, there are actually things that are going to be coming to life in a few, in several weeks, I hope. The greenhouse right here. It's so cold, it's unheated, so I haven't been able to do anything in there. Well, I want to thank all of you for your well wishes during that cold and virus that James and I just went through, which was quite unpleasant. Lasted at least 3 weeks, and so we were in the clutches of that for a while. Well, anyway, since there's nothing we can do out here today, we'll be in the house. James has made a big pot of spaghetti, and boy is he a good cook. So this is the perfect time to come into this little room called either a keeping room. In America we'd call this a keeping room. It's a combination. It's got the kitchen connected to a very small sitting room. And it is very small indeed, so you want to make use of every single bit of space. So what I've done here in the corner is turned it into something of a sewing area, because when I don't want to be in my studio, because it's so cold up there, I want to be in a nice warm room to work, so I want everything close at hand. And that's what I've got here, just baskets and baskets of items that I need for needle felting or stitching. Get an idea of exactly how small this space actually is. There's a little school desk here with a school desk chair, and atop that, one of the sewing machines, which is the one I will be using over the winter. I love this sewing machine, but I also like the Singer Featherweight, but I think I'd probably use this one even more. But it's backed up against one of the couches that I sit on, and then James is right across from me on another couch. But I'm not going to film that because the room is a mess. So you have to look at this part of the room. But it's very snug. And over here we have a dry sink, a treadle, not a treadle sewing machine, but a hand crank sewing machine. I'll show you that sometime. It's really great. But what I want to concentrate on today as our antique of the day would be spool boxes and needle boxes, because we have several of them in this room, along with Titus. Titus doesn't appear in videos very often. It's always Stella. Before we talk about that, I wanted to show you a few of the interesting items atop this little school desk. I especially wanted to show you this. I think this is absolutely darling. Somebody sent this to me in a box of laces and ribbons. And it is a little, look at this. It's so cute. It's a pincushion, and it says, on the little tag it says, I am a tape measure. So we have this little elephant. It says, I am a tape measure, pull my tail. And when you pull his little tail, out comes a tape measure. I don't want to pull it out too far because it doesn't like to go back in very easily, and I don't want to ruin it. But I think this is probably around the 1930s or so. Just think it's so sweet. Another little sewing box or little pincushion that I like is this little metal box. Now it says made in occupied Japan, so it's not that old, but I think it's a very sweet, very vintage looking pincushion and pin box. Here's an item made of celluloid. And celluloid, I did a whole video on celluloid boxes, but I had never seen a celluloid spool box. Interesting, because you open up the top and the spools set inside, and you can take the threads, pull them up through this top, and then when you need any particular color, you can just pull it through one of these top openings without having to open the box. But I think it's kind of a charming little box too. Another item that I have a lot of in this room are these wicker sewing boxes. Now these were imported from China in the 19th century by the millions, so you can easily find these, but they are antiques and they're so useful to store things and to use for your sewing implements. A really handy little implement was a sewing bird. Let's say you were stitching a hem or something and you needed just one more hand to hold on to something tightly. Well, these generally would have two little pin cushions, but a very tight beak. So you would take your tail, press in the tail, open up the beak, slide that fabric in there and close it, and this beak would hold that fabric taut for you while you stitched your hem, and your two hands were free. So this was a very convenient and pretty little item. What I want to concentrate on today are the spool boxes and the thread boxes. Now, spool boxes were not necessary until women were able to get sewing machines in the 1850s. In the 1850s, they began to produce sewing machines for the general public, which required thread to be on a spool. So they invented a way to put threads or twists on a wooden spool, thereby allowing you to use it in your sewing machine. So these spool cabinets and these spool boxes and these thread boxes were used in the stores. They were for the fabric stores and they were for the general stores, so that you could come in, choose the color or the type of thread that you needed, and a special needle for your machine. Now, these are two different things here. This, with the two drawers, is a needle box, and this on top of it is actually a separate piece, just sitting on the top, and this is a spool cabinet. So the needle boxes would generally have their advertising on the front. Markings on the boxes, it makes them so much nicer, but sometimes they're very difficult to read. This one actually says Union Needle Company, and then it's embossed with JHM. I'm not sure what that company is, but this metal spool box on top is so much clearer. It says mercerized sewing thread, and it's got a lot of neat lettering on it and a couple little logos, such as this little star up here, because this is Star Twist. I love that, Star Twist. Now, some of your cabinets will have little glass drawers like this, little glass fronts, and some will be solid wood with the text on the side of the wood. These are glass so that you could just see what was inside. But then the customer would open up the drawer and find exactly what they needed. These are particularly old. It's really interesting. This is silk embroidery thread. It's Brainerd and Armstrong Company, which also made spool boxes. I'm going to show you one in a minute. This was a sample card. It says, our new wash silk sample card. Best in the world. Ladies, ask your storekeeper for it. This is very, very old. Pull the thread like this. And I'm not going to just pull the thread like that. I'm not even ever going to use this. This is just too old. But it's so very beautiful, as you can see. Just look at this old silk thread or twist. So these would be carefully stacked in the little rows, much better than I can do it, because I'm sure that at the time they were nice and tightly woven together, not loose like that. I don't need 1,000 spools of thread, so I just put sewing materials in these snaps, needles, pins, etc. I love these little drawers, and I actually put thread in them too. Let me show you the side of this box because these are still available. I just saw some of these on eBay not too long ago. Now this is not a wooden box. This is a metal spool box. But let me show you the side of it because it's got really neat graphics. So the metal box, actually they've got a wood finish on it that they kind of did some false graining on it to make it look like wood, but it's really metal. Star twist for hand and machine sewing, mercerized sewing thread. And then it says American Thread Company, manufactured by the American Thread Company. Your spool cabinets. There were also spool columns, and they would stand on the floor and be quite tall, and probably at least 20 to 25 drawers in them. But what's really great is if you can get some of the lettering and actually see it. It's very difficult because it does fade out pretty easily, but also look at the knobs and the drawer pulls because that makes a big difference in the quality of the piece. And also look at that nice work on the edges there. Now this one up here, it says black. This one's hard to make out and I can't read it. This one says J&P Coats. And this one says assorted colors. One day I'd like to get in here and see if I cannot touch these up in a very, very meticulous way so that that lettering can be read better. The drawers out of that J&P spool box, Coats and Clark, because I wanted to show you the lettering, spool cotton, and I wanted to show you how large these drawers actually are. Looks like somebody repaired this one. And I think that this at one time had the little separators in it because you can see those grooves where they would have held the thread. But now it's just a nice big open drawer. So this is the best spool cabinet that I have, and this is Brainerd and Armstrong, the same company that makes this silk, puts out this beautiful silk embroidery thread. And you can see the lettering here, just barely Brainerd and Company. I think it says needles. So the needles were in this drawer. Not anymore. The second spool. We have spools upon spools upon spools of thread. Very deep. It goes in quite far. Sometimes they have just a few little sections of different sizes for the thread and the twist, and then a nice big space for whatever else you want to put them in. Here I have glass eyes for needle felting. And sometimes there are no separators at all. Which makes it a lot more convenient to store just about anything you want. Papers, loose embroidery threads, needles, etc. And the best thing about the Brainerd and Armstrong spool boxes are the brass brackets on the drawers. See the little bees? These are made of brass. They're embossed. They say Brainerd and Armstrong, and they're wonderful little bees. And they're on all three drawers, so there are 6 of them. They weren't always bees. They could be all sorts of different designs that they came up with. They were really stunning, and that would make a real impression in your store. Also, the pulls are made of brass. And the idea here was for this to be a very, very appealing piece of furniture, more or less, in a store, in a general store, on a counter, to really draw in the customer. Here would have had a top on it. It would have had a top, but that was missing when I bought it, which turned out to be a pretty good thing because I can set a lot of things on the inside of this little space. It's kind of like an open drawer. One thing about this has only got 4 drawers in it. It has no separators in it, but it's spool cotton for hand and machine stitching. And as you can see, this one has no separators in it, so it just would have been loose spools of thread inside these drawers. But what I really like about this one are these wonderful knobs. They've got a little brass centerpiece and a nice wooden knobs, and usually the material that these were fashioned out of would be something really good, like maple or oak. They didn't use cheap wood. They wanted this to be a real showpiece in their store. And here I store tags and buttons. And this one doesn't shut so great. It doesn't shut all the way. But, you know, that's the price of age, because, you know, these are from the 19th century. So they're not going to be perfect. If you find one that's perfect, you'll probably pay quite a bit for it. But, like I said, to me, what's important is really nice knobs, drawers that are somewhat easy to open and close, and the markings still readable on the outsides of the doors. Now, I couldn't show you the spool boxes without showing you this box as well. This is not down there in that sewing area. This is actually up in the studio. But it is also a box that would have been in a store, domestic sewing machines, and this held needles and parts and supplies for your sewing machine. And they would have probably been very small things, and they would have been stored up here in the top so that you could see what was inside the back where the drawers are. But I have instead put a lot of vintage threads and needles in this. I guess what I really wanted to show you was the inside of the box, because it was lined with this old piece of newspaper which says, 1897, and it's a standard pattern, so these were dress patterns. I don't think they would have been in this box because it was way too small, but it was lined with this box, or with this newspaper, which is kind of another neat piece of history. And we were talking about the J&P Coats company, which had a lot of the spool boxes. Here they are with their beautiful darning threads, which they really made a lot of darning threads. Can you imagine that? Darning and mending socks. We just don't do that anymore, do we? We just throw things away. But they didn't do that. They had to stitch those socks up and wear them for a very long time. I think that's wonderful. And here's another one. Clark's 4-strand cotton thread, pure white, and this was also for darning socks. So here in the back is where everything would be stored for the general store. They would keep the product in the back here. If they ran out, they could refill the front section. And now this, I don't understand, because this is for spools of thread, and the box doesn't say anything about thread. Not all spool cabinets were very, very large. Some were very, very small, such as this one. This was made by the Brooks Company, and they always had a really nice little image on the front. This has got some beautiful little painting. And then open it up and you'd find your spools of thread. I've got bone buttons in it, and it would say Brooks Sewing Cottons. So even the inside is pretty and attractive. And even on the bottom of the box was their advertising. So these are quite small, but they're also really nice little sewing boxes, spool boxes. You can still buy these accordion sewing boxes today, but this one's pretty old. And what I love about it is that it's covered in fabric. And these are so sweet. They open on the top, and then they also open into little compartments on either side. But what I love about this one is the interior has this wonderful pattern on it. So, so pretty. So beautiful and old. And these are so handy to just carry around if you need to work in another part of the house, or you're sitting on your couch or a chair. Take your little sewing box over there, and it's just so compact. I want to show you this because this was in one of the spool boxes that I bought once upon a time. Lots of times you'll find threads and ribbons and sorts of things like that, and this was inside one of the spool boxes, and this was obviously a little pincushion, but it's fallen apart. And look at it. This is so strange. Look at the needle. It's kind of spooky if you want to, if you really want to know. Look at all those pins. There must be hundreds of pins right there in this little silken pincushion. I think that's so interesting. Now, what can you expect to pay for a spool box? Factors involved in these spool boxes. The wood that they were made of, the ornate design on the box, how well the drawers open. Mostly the hardware, I think, is what's important to me. What kind of hardware? I think these are such interesting drawer pulls. And really the lettering, if it's really clear and it's not reproduced, because there are some that have been reproduced. They'll reproduce the lettering and you can purchase it for your boxes. Mine's very unclear, but I'd love to touch it up myself. But if you can still read it, I think that makes it a little more valuable. And then, of course, you've got, once again, these incredible drawer pulls and these wonderful hinges here. And down here we have, once again, really interesting drawer pulls. Now, these I had to replace because there were none, but I found some that are just as nice. So, those are pretty special. And I forgot to show you this, which I think is also a display piece in a store. I do not know what it was for. I just put miscellaneous stuff in it. But I do believe this was some sort of display piece in a general store. So you can pay anywhere from $50 for a small spool box or a thread box, all the way up to $1,000. It just depends. You could get really lucky and find one in a shop. And I'd say that if you find one for $150 to $200 and it's in nice shape, you did very well. Closing, I just want to say thanks to all of you who were such faithful viewers and commenters in 2023. It's been great having you, and I want to welcome all the new subscribers I've had over the last 3 weeks, even though I've been gone. Welcome to 2024. If there's anything that you would like to see in particular over the next year, please let me know, and I'll see what I can do to accommodate you. In the meantime, from Hopalong Hollow, this is Jerry, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.